cache or float management. But before we start, I want to take a few seconds to introduce myself, what I do, and who I am, basically. My name is Justin. I work as a Power Platform architect for a company based out of Dubai called as Data Semantics. Uh, I've been a Power Platform architect for about 3 years now. I've been doing development also and also the other activities around it. But prior to that, I used to be a data platform consultant working purely on Azure Data Platform as it specifically. And if you want to connect with me, my LinkedIn credentials are there on screen. You can use that to connect, and then we can sync up on talk about more about Power Platform and how it can be useful uh, in your scenarios, or if you're stuck with some issues, etc. I will be able to help you out as well. Before we start, if anyone can see my screen as well and hear me clearly, please let me know so that everyone can be partaking in part of the session that I'm going to take forward.
Yes, Justin, we can see you crystal clear.
Great. All right. So let me start with what the problem statement that we faced was. Typically in the industry, when you look at, there's something we call as petty cash or your float that usually goes around in your office. It's usually meant for small expenses uh, or anything that is out of books, basically, in the sense that you would be using it for taxi fares, hotel stays, business lunches, for purchases that are not really intended by card or any other payments usually. And then this is also meant for your employees usually. So when we used to work at different companies as consultants, we used to get a specific amount of cash every month, and it was a specific fixed amount where we used to use it, and then once it's completed, we used to go and reimburse it as part of uh, our process. And then we used to usually do is that the whole process started with we had to fill a reconciliation form, then which would have our attachments such as the invoices, the spend classification or the category of the spend, what did we spend on the invoice, the invoice number, the amount spent, etc. And then finally, once it is completed, it would go into an approval lifecycle. Basically, it used to be my line manager, then it goes to line manager to the accountants or the finance manager, etc. And then finally, it takes about a week or so before it was reimbursed into our own accounts as part of the spend that we did. Now, this might be similar in most companies. Large organizations means it might be a larger process, but usually this is how the petty cash works in most organizations. Now, when we started talking to one of our customers, these were the pain points or the problems that were they facing the most. And also from my experience of handling petty cash a lot, we used to find I as an employee also used to find the same amount of problems around it as well. One was the managing and tracking of spends, which is you might be spending for let's say cab rides, you might be spending for hotel stays. Sometimes you might forget to take receipts of them. Sometimes you do take receipts, but then you forget to actually go back and reconcile, and that used to be a very cumbersome process altogether because you need to do um, your accounting at one end of the month or when before your billing period, etc. So you have to go sit down, make sure you track everything, give the attachments, put into a form, and then finally submit it. And some of the cases where these happens is the problem is that these used to be a very opaque process, which means once I submit it, it might be through the petty cash manager who used to handle the petty cash. He or she would collect the cash or have a fund with them and then would disperse it based on the documents that you provide. Now, because of the lack of governance in this process and also the how opaque the process was, it was not easy to track. And also, we have seen that in the customer that we worked with, there used to be a lot of processes where it would lead to misuse or fraud in the petty cash being dispersed. And also, one of the biggest problems that I faced when I was working as a consultant as well was you would not know when you would need to have your petty cash available or when you're low on funds usually, or your management doesn't know when you're low on funds, because by the time they would take the approvals and disperse the cash to you, you might be running out of money when you're, let's say, overseas as a consultant or working as part of your business meeting, etc. And this also was because of problems with the customer that we're working with, where they had their employees traveling to other parts of the world for business meetings, for acquisitions, etc. And this was a very big hectic for them to make sure that their employees when they're overseas are not running out of funds, and also to know when to top up for them based on their levels and how much is the amount that they need to be topped up on specifically. Now, considering this, what we did is we took up those problems, we started looking at this as a platform, and we decided what platform do we build this on. So we had two options in our hand. One, we go with a complete native application, let's say an iOS, an Android, and a website and a web page that would work, which would technically take us, let's say, somewhere around 6 to 7 months at least of BRD scope of working, and then finally building the product out, at least getting the MVP ready for us to ship it to the customer so that they could see the product and then use it and then say, oh, we want some UI changes, etc., etc. So, the typical software development lifecycle that would go into a process of building a native app. And this also has a lot of other problems, which is you need to have a large team to work on specific platforms. So a web app developer, you would require a developer on iOS, on Android, and then finally a testing team to make sure that all these three apps are tested and also finished. So then the other option was to go with local platforms. So the local platform that we selected as a Microsoft partner was Power Platform, which means that we could get our MVP completed within 2 weeks. So we could show our customers a fully functioning product, at least not the integrations part of it. It's not integrated to your backend, etc. But at least from the UI experience, we could give it to them and show them this is how the product would be if they were to select this platform and then get their sign-offs and say, oh, we like this UI, we like the functionalities, we like what is built into it. Now let's build this as a complete product with all the integrations built around it. Now, that was the first one, platform that's easy to use for the employees to report petty cash expenses. So you build one platform, you build one app, which can be used on desktop, mobile, be it on iOS, Android, or be it on tablets. Perfect. This next one is we wanted to have a multi-level approval process. We didn't want a single point of approval. We wanted to make sure that there's a chain of approval that goes into it so that becomes you as an employee would be sending it for approval to your line managers, and from line managers it would go to the finance manager and then finally to an accountant who would then disburse the cash for you. Now, with multi-level approvals, what happens usually is that you need to make sure that there are places where you have an option to, let's say, I don't want this, or there's a problem in the invoices that you've raised, or there's a problem with the petty cash spend that you've raised. Maybe it is out of budget spends. That means we didn't classify them as your petty cash spend based on your grade, etc., in the company. And then also because of a lot of other reasons, they would want to go back and say, please raise another report, etc. So that's why we want to build a very complex multi-level process which had request for information as part of the process. And with Power Platforms, Power Automate flows, we were able to build these very complex flows around it to make sure that we could handle all these scenarios and also make sure that it makes life easier of every employee involved in the entire process. The next part is we wanted to make sure that any application that you build needs to have some sort of analytics built into it. It can be a very simple analytics for you as an employee. When you open up your phone, you could see how much your spend was, what is your forecasted spend, what are the categories that you spend the most on a month-to-month basis. So we want to build a very simple analytics solution, and Power Apps has built-in charts, etc., which we leveraged to make this possible. Now, apart from this, since we were storing our data in something called as Dataverse, we were able to do something called as an Azure Synapse link, which meant I could have all the data on Dataverse having synced directly to the Azure Synapse platform, which then the corporate team or the team from the customer would then build Power BI dashboards or Tableau dashboards off their data warehouse and then have it merged with their financial numbers, also to make sure how this is being managed, etc. And apart from just the analytics on the value, we also got analytics on the entire process. So we could see different bottlenecks in the process, as in we could see how much time each level or each person took to approve a preset, let's say when a request is raised, how much time each person took to complete that. And it also gave us a a very good insight into the entire process and also see how it can be further improved, etc. Now, the next part that we wanted to look at was the solution was to build automated alerts. So every time we know that the employee's balance is about to run out, or there's a specific threshold, let's say when the person hits about 90% is complete of his petty cash balance, it would automatically send out an alert to the accountants and the finance manager to actually go ahead and do a top up for them so that they're not running out of cash based on their grade, etc. So these thresholds and the balances based on their grades. And this also was built into the application to make sure that no one runs out of money when they are in abroad or overseas situation. And then finally, what we did as an extra step was to make sure that instead of actually carrying around cash in hand, we wanted to make it easier. So we partnered with one of the banks in Dubai to make sure that we got their petty cash cards. They have float cards or they call petty cash cards where you have prepaid value. So you can fill it with cash as you want, and then you could supply it to your employees and they could go around and then use those cards to do the purchases. Now with this, what extra step that we got is the cumbersome process of each employee to note down how much they spend on a daily basis and what they spend. It became easier because we used uh, Power Automate's RPA bot to actually go into those websites where we got the statements of the card on a daily basis, did a web scraping, extracted the information, and then wrote that back into our Dataverse so that we could keep track of every single expense. And when the employee logs into the app, they would get all the expenses for the previous day of what they've spent, and that could be then consumed and then used, etc. So they could then just go click on a button, go through the process, and I will show you a demo also of the platform when we do this. And then finally, we wanted to write back these journal entries into your ERP as well, so that when it's completed, it's approved, we know and classify these spends based on different account codes, etc. And it would be posted into your ERP as well. Now, this is what we have done as a solution. Now, let me go through the architecture. Uh, I'm not sure the crowd around here today, they're more technical or more business sided, but at a very high level, this is how the architecture was, but there are more components that were used in between to make it a bit more robust and more redundant. So it starts with your card balances, which we are scraping from the website that the bank had provided us with. We would use RPA's desktop flows to go web scrape, get the information, pick it up, and then write it back into our app store, which is on Dataverse, which is the one that you can see here, the Dataverse. And then from the Dataverse was where our Petty Cash app was built on Power App, running off, which would then go read the information for each employee, which is tagged towards their card numbers, etc. And then they could go click on a specific line item or a specific spend and then book it for approvals with the attachments that they would take from, let's say, by uploading an image from the camera or a document that just got saved onto their phone in their files or documents folder. And then finally, once they do that, it'll go for an approval flow, which is also built on Power Automate's web flows, run through the whole process, get the information, approvals are done, and then finally, what's completed, it gets written back into the App Store, uh, the data store basically, and then it would then go into the ERP. In this case, it was Infor Sun ERP. These expenses were posted using the web services that were exposed to us by the customer. We have done for Infor and for Oracle EBS as well, where there are in-house Oracle or Infor consultants who had built web services or SOAP services specifically, which we were calling from Power Automate flows using a specific template and then pushing those information back to ERP and then posting them to the correct journal according to the correct account number, chart accounts, etc. And then finally, the ERP was integrated with the bank to do the replenishment or reimbursement of those amounts, basically using edge to edge integration. So this is the entire process, or this is the architecture, and the things in the middle was completely Power Platform. We never used anything apart from Power Platform. We had the chances of using, let's say, something from Azure, let's say Azure Functions, etc. But we felt that Power Platform had all the right tools for the use case that we are building, and then we went ahead with completely with Power Platform. Now, there are a couple of things which we wanted to do different in the beginning, but since the process of RPA being a bit slow, we wanted to kind of have this the RPA part completely API based. So another Cloudflow runs and extracts information from an API from the bank. But uh, since the rules in this country are a bit different and they didn't have any API integrations or API endpoints for us to read from, we had to go with RPA bot to go and read them. If it was to be structured in another country, we would be doing it completely using an API integration module, which would then go read the information for your cards from the bank's API engine specifically. Now, let me just show you some of the screens in the app so that you get an idea so that I could show you, and then I would go into the demo, and then later we would move into the Q&A session as well. So this is the app that you can see. Once you log in, you'll be getting a blank screen basically. You would be getting your card balance, which is also being retrieved um, from the RPA process from your card details, or this is be from any other card integrations, etc., that we want to pick up from. Now, once we look at it, you can see the approved claims that has been claimed. So whatever claim you've raised and what has been approved, you get to see those numbers. And what is your pending, which is basically what you have raised and what you have to get approved or reimbursed for specifically. Now, once you hit the plus button over here, you would then drill down into a level where you can see all your transaction entries. These transaction entries are actually being captured from your card statements. So the card statement is being read, and then whatever is the name of that, uh, the merchant that you paid towards, you could actually get the name of the merchant, the information or the number, receipt number, etc., and then the date, and then also the value for that specific transaction. Now, you can click on any of these transactions that you have created or it's been automated created. Let's say the first one, when I click on it, I could then go and write a business justification on why it was spent, even though this merchant name might be very generic for uh, your your line managers or anyone in the upper chain would understand because of you be transacting into other countries as well. So this would be picked up, and then you would have a specific justification. You can categorize that spend, let's say business lunch, meetings, travel, uh, etc. So whatever categories you want to put in, you can use those specifically. There are preset categories based on your chart of accounts that we want to map it towards. And then you have a business unit that you can select that you are part of. Sometimes you might be working across multiple BUs, so you can specifically set which BU you are using this cash towards, so they are cross-charged from the corporate level. And then you attach your invoice that you want to give as your supporting document, and then you would go ahead and click on Add Line, and that becomes your new expense report or expense claim. So you can have multiple line items in a single submission. So let's think about it as you spend an entire week on in another country or another, let's say meetings all together in the same country as well. And after your entire week of meetings, you can just come back, use the application, click on the plus, click the transaction you want to enter, upload the supporting evidence, the justification, the categorization, BU information, and then go ahead and repeat the process again till you add all of them together into one single report, and then you hit submit, which then goes into our approval flow. So the approval flow, which you can see here, which is very easy to understand and very easy to look at. So every time you submit a report, you could see what is the amount that you've raised it for, and you can see where exactly it is stuck at. So as you can see, it started with the line manager where it says blue, which means it's pending. And as you can see, when it moves forward, it keeps going all the way. And then once it's been released, that is when uh, it's posted to the ERP and then your accountant signs off. And then finally, it starts doing the H2H integration to push the records or the money to your card. It will be coming as green. And then you could expect the payments to be done the same day or the next day based on the time it takes. And this way you keep up track of everything that happens within the application for each and every report that you have raised. And you can have a very clear cut uh, idea of when and where it is stuck, and you would know if you've been reimbursed as well. If not, you can always go back and check who it is being stuck with, and then contact them maybe through email or through Teams, and then tell them, please approve my request or why it's stuck at specifically. So it makes it a very transparent process for your employees and for everyone involved, even for your uh, stakeholders as well to see that how each person's value is being uh, submitted until approval and then dispersal. Finally, what we did is you get a built-in report, which is not built on Power BI or anything. It's just built on the built-in analytics or the cars and the visuals that's there from Power Platform. So you don't have to pay any other extra charges towards it to run it, and you could see your total amount you're spending, how much you've spent by amount and by count, how much has been, how many reports or submissions that you've made. Let's say 11 requested, 9 have been approved, total amount, and how much has been approved and how much has been declined. So the decline means that either those submissions or line items uh, were not part of your expenses, or they are not classified for you to be you can't expense that amount of money maybe. So let's say you go for a business lunch and you spend, let's say, 200 or 300 dirhams when you're actually supposed to be spending, let's say, 50 or 60. So based on your grade, because of which it might get declined, and then those information also gets transferred, and you could see those graphs in here with the month specifically. Now, this is a very basic reporting within the application, but we do have an application report that was built on Power BI separately using the Synapse link that I was talking about. Now, let's start with the demo. Let me just show you how the app looks like in person so you get a better idea of what it can do. Let me just open this up. All right. So this is how the login screen works. So if you are playing multiple roles in your company, let's say you are playing as an employee, you might be a line manager, you could be a finance manager, a general manager, and an accountant. So based on your grade, you'll be seeing those information in here. But if you're just an employee, let's say I was a consultant before, I would be just getting this employee screen and I would be starting to use the application immediately. There is no other way I would be able to access it. It's an immediate login and start using it immediately. So once I get in, uh, I will be able to see the screen, which says I have about 280 pending. I have about 2,100 in my card, and I have to submit 0 claims that is pending to submit. Now, once I'm in here, there are a couple of things I can look at. The menu, which gives me to see all my claims, track my request, and add my card. So what we have done is you can add multiple cards in here. So you get to add, let's say, one card, you can add another card. So if you have multiple cards for different purposes, you could add them all in here. And then we use those information that is being stored in our Dataverse to pick that up during our RPA process and use that values to go into the bank's website, pick the values that we require, pick the statements, and then bring it back and then tag it to you as a user. And then you could see all those consolidated values in one single view. So you could go ahead, add your card number, information, and that's about it. So we are only capturing information that is very much needed. No other personal information is being captured in here, like your expiry date, etc. We're capturing your card information, name on your card, and the last 2 digits of the card number. And that's the only information that we required when we wanted to go to the bank's website and scrape that information from there. Now, let me go to raise the claims. Let's start with the plus button in here. Once you're in here, you can see all your different transactions that's taken place. So right now, since for the demo, we don't have any information coming from a merchant, so we've called it as business dinner, business travel, purchase, etc. But as you saw in the screenshots, you'd be getting the merchant names in here, not really what you spent on, but you would be getting, let's say, you spent at a hotel, you would get Hilton, you would be getting whatever the network that they're using. That merchant name would be coming up into the transaction entry. You can then use the dates to go back maybe a few months back. You want to take some transactions, submit them now. You can still do them as long as there's no problem with you submitting them for reimbursement. Usually, companies require them to be closed in the same uh, closing period of the month so that they know that these are the transactions for that month when they close the books. Now, let me select on one specific item in here. So let's say business dinner. Now in here, I can write a business justification. let's say. I could specify this as food. And then in this case, it's just a test case. So it's going to have test as my business unit. But technically, you would have all your other BUs in here that you might be interacting with. So you could select those specifically based on your employee code, etc. But if you're just one BU employee, you would have only one BU under you. And based on that, you would be writing that, attaching an image of your invoice, and then just clicking add line. So now it's asking me to attach an image. So let me go find an image, say something different. I have an image. So let's go with this, add line. So now once it's done, that line gets added into my report. Now I can add um, multiple transactions in here. It's the same way, but every time, as you can see, if I want to complete a specific entry or an expense, I need to always attach an image. So attaching an image is a mandatory information that we need to have. And then based on that, it will pick up. Now, another thing that we built into it is to make sure that we get exchange rates of the value on a daily basis so that we know when the transaction was done and what the exchange rate would be on that day so that we could convert them if you're traveling across different geographies specifically. In this case, they were more oriented with start with the first phase where they wanted to only have people from a single currency transaction. So we used AED or dirhams in this case. Now, let me go back to my claims. Sorry, raise claims. Let me submit this for approval. So once I do this, it goes into approval, and I could just go back and then I could just wait for it to pop up here. I could go to request, and I could see there's a request that's open in here, which is waiting with my line manager. Now, since I have admin access, I could play different personas. So I'm going to switch between employee to the line manager. And I could see that there is two pending in here, which is the new one that got raised now, 21st 10. So I could click on this. I could look at it, the approver, finance manager, the name, accountant, everything, the business, all the information. I could see the information that I've given. I can see more details, the attachments, all the information in here. So I could look at the justification sent by my employee, what are the comments that I've entered, what the accountant has entered, the general manager has entered. Every information would be captured in here. So later when you go down, if something was rejected, you could always go back to your claim and then actually understand why it was rejected or who rejected it. And then if you want, you can adjust it and then send it back later so that you don't lose the money at least that you were supposed to uh, get reimbursed if it's supposed to be reimbursed. Now, I can just add some line information, say approved, and I can do submit. So now that's gone for approval. Now I can switch the personas again. Let me go to the next one, which is going to be uh, the general manager. Sorry, go to the accountant. So the accountant's view, I will be getting the same one that just come through. Same information. I could click on details. I could see the comments from the line manager, the comments from the employee who's raised it. In this case, it's Justin. And then I could actually go ahead and see the attachments. And then I could just go ahead and write a comment and approve it, saying, so this way it goes through the entire process. I don't want to take you to the entire process, but I could just switch back to my employee. I could go to track requests. I could see exactly which level of approvals I've reached. So right now it's at the GM level, general manager level, and then once it's completed, it would just get released for that specific expense specifically. Now, this way, if I go to my claims, I could click on waiting for GM approval. I can click on it. I could click on view details. I could see the same set of information in here from that specific employee. I could look at my report and see what has happened to it, the same set of information that you can see across everything else as well. Now, let me go back to the reports. So in this case, I can see that I've requested between these 2 months. Let me just expand my search to almost 6 years. So now I can see that I've requested 410 AED in this case, and total is pending is that much amount. And I can see them by approved, pending, disallowed, etc. So I could see what level of information is being tracked, what is the category that is being used. This is a dummy value that was used in the beginning to test out, that's why. But in this case, the category is food, which is being tracked. And you can actually see how much you spend for food, travels, stays, etc. And then you could have a graph for it by the employee, and then look at it by count, by amount, etc., directly from within the application itself. So which makes it very simple for you as an employee to understand how much you're spending, how much is being pending, and how much has been approved as well. And also for your management to understand what is being spent a lot when consultants are going on fields, etc. Is it because they're traveling a lot, they're spending for travel? Is it because there are too many meetings, there are so many business lunches? So this gives you a very good view of the spend from this specific petty cash or float, which was not really tracked as much. You had information that you're spending X amount, but not to a level where you could see those categories, etc. At before even the approvals go through. So this is very informative information that you get. That usually you get it only at the end once you get it into your ERPs. Now, sorry, I think. Sorry, oops. That's it. So apart from this, as I said, this is what the entire platform can do with it. We also have it. So if you're interested in the platform, you want to try it out, you want to contact to get more information about the platform, you can use the bit link uh, in here to know about it. We have some other ideas around it to improve it, to have some other information around it to be built so that it can work with not just cards, also with cash, so that you're also tracking information that is coming from, let's say, you use third-party cab aggregators like Uber, Lyft, etc., whatever works in your country. So using those, we want to capture those information also and have them directly feed into your application. So we are looking into options of how that can also be done to expand the application's horizon to make it work. Now, if you ask me, is this the only application that works? No, there are applications from other companies around the world that provide SaaS platforms. That's from SAP's, OutSystems, etc. They also provide similar fully built applications. But with Power Platform, you don't stop at just building one application. You have a platform which you spend money on, and then you can build any sort of applications. And this is one of the examples of an application, but there are many, many more that you can build on this platform. And it's completely adaptive, it's advanced. You can be a low-code developer or a pro developer to work on the platform to build anything that you want to build to this level. Now, if you ask me some of the statistics around this application, how many people took to build it, I would say 2 people took to build a very uh, advanced application to a level that works right now, as you can see. Usually, you would require at least 5, 6 developers on different platforms to make it work. With the integration side different, you have an API engineer, you have front end, you have a back end, and you have a business layer who runs and builds these things out for you to build these kind of applications. But with Power Platform, you can shorten the amount of people you require to build something of this sort and still be considered as an app that is worthy of being on your phones, etc., and very much similar looking, such as your native applications. Now, I think that's it for my session specifically. I think if you have any questions, we can start with the Q&A round specifically.
Thank you, Justin. Okay, so Tim is asking, will you be able to share your slides?
Yeah, sure. I can share the slides, Tim. I have no problem with the sharing slides. I think I'll share
So
with Raz, and then I think he can share it across to everyone. That will be best option.
sure, Justin, and if you can maybe share a link in the chat or share your contact details,
Yeah,
then people can get in touch with you.
sure. I can do that as well. So it'll be easier as well.
Right. Awesome. So we've got 25 minutes to talk about how we built the Power App then, basically. So what we need is questions from everyone. So now's a great time to start asking your questions and really get to know and understand the hurdles and challenges faced in such scenarios. So we have a question first by Philippe, who's asking, could you explain the architecture approach, Dataverse versus SharePoint? That'd be really
Okay,
helpful, Justin.
sure, Philip. So the reason why we don't pick SharePoint is one of the things because of what we've seen is security on SharePoint when we work with, let's say, like Power Platform. Or we usually have a problem with security because we usually have to give access to your SharePoint list or your SharePoint page first to the all the users, and then setting up context such as an ex-employee, let's say Justin gets access to rows 1 and 2 or only set of records or set of columns is a bit harder for us to do when we use SharePoint. And there are also SharePoint's performance limitations that we come into when there's large amount of records, etc. But with Dataverse, what we have seen is you get to work very similar to how you build your relational databases. You have row level securities, your object level securities, and you can set records that only you created can be visible. And also based on if these set of records, let's say the first 10 records are belonging to a team, they could look at it specifically. And also with performance, Dataverse is very much strong in performance wise because it is very similar to what is being used on Dynamics 365 platform. And you could do a lot of other things like custom plugins. You could do deduplication jobs. You could have data flows running in there. You have an option of, as I said, Azure Synapse Link to sync your Dataverse with your Azure data warehouses so that you have your data that is on Dataverse being synced back to your large enterprise data warehouses for it to be used and consumed for other processes, etc. So with that in mind, Dataverse was our primary choice to start with, apart from SharePoint. I know by licensing terms, if you look at it, SharePoint would give you that free license that comes with Power Platform being on E3, F1, or E5 licenses of Microsoft. But with Dataverse, you have a platform which is more extensible. You can write more additional plugins. You have dashboarding capabilities on it. You can create forms. And also, it's not just stops there, right? So you could build a Canvas app today on Dataverse, and you can extend that Canvas app with a model-driven app, which can be also using the same data that you have built onto your Dataverse. With SharePoint, you are limited only to Canvas apps. So I hope that answered your question, Philip.
Okay, so whilst we wait for questions, oh, there you go. Thank you from Philippe.
Thank you.
So thank you there, Justin, for explaining the difference between the options for Dataverse and SharePoint, which is often a common question. Um, so Kim has asked a question. With the flows you refer to Power Automate, could you break that down, please, Justin, as to
Sure,
give some a breakdown as to how you use Power Automate?
sure. So I can just give you an example. Let me just go into my website here. So the flows that we used, oh, oops, I'm not signed in. Interesting. Uh, so we have created 3 different flows. The first one we have created was the cloud flows, which is used for approvals, etc. Then we built desktop flows, which is basically for consuming or scraping web from the website. So scraping information from the website, we used the Power Automate desktop to create the flow. And then the cloud flows were specifically used for 2 things. One is for approvals, and one is for just the write back into ERP using the SOAP services. Now, as you said, you wanted to see the flows. Let me just have, let me just look at the link 1 second. I just get you don't have the actual flows with me, but I can show you an image of it. I hope that would be fine. Uh, just get the image up for you. So this is a sample of the desktop flow that we've written for opening up and reading information from there. Then we had a flow which was used to send information as well, which is a very high level flow. I don't have a very detailed flow with me because of this is how we had built for the customer specifically. But I can show you a very high level information about what it could do, etc. And then for a better understanding of how we used the SOAP services, this is how the SOAP service, uh, what we have gotten from the web services team to use was in the structure of this as well. So we had a structure in here. We had variables in here which we wanted to update, like the description, journal type, post-provisional account code, accounting period, journal number. So we used the entire thing in our into our flows. So when a line item is declined or is started, we would pick that up based on automated flows from Dataverse. So based on actions, triggers, etc., this would start running. Initialized has a condition that checks and then finally runs back and then posts it using custom connectors that we built. And the custom connector would connect to our on-premises data gateway to talk to the SOAP services or web services that was in the internal Dataverse specifically for that. And that's how it was being used. But if you want to see the actual flows and working, etc., I think I can get that for you as well, maybe as pictures or as a screenshots, etc. Kim, if you want to reach out to me on uh, LinkedIn, it would be great. Uh, Mark has asked, how many transactions are you handling with your screen How is the performance? So from the transactions part, we were handling about 100 transactions and about uh, 25 cards when we started with. And we were taking about uh, an hour to 2.5 hours to do the scraping specifically for about 20 cards. So on a daily basis, we would have about 100, an average 100 transactions, and we would scrape 20 employee cards to use it. So that's why I said, Mark, in the beginning, if I was to rewrite the entire program and we had an API access towards the banking network, we would have used the API instead of RPA. RPA was the last fallback that we had to do with, but we would have gone with API because it would be much more performance and we could be scrapping within a couple of minutes compared to the hours that we take right now. I hope I answered both Kim and Mark's questions as well. And the next person has asked is Venkata has asked me a quick question, wondering how does the licensing work on the current architecture? Okay, great. So let's minimize this, sorry. So if you look at this entire architecture, your petty cache would be falling into your, I think the current pricing would be the per app licensing, which is $5 per user. So you get two applications for the petty cache for one application, so that's $5. And with the $5, you get free uh, Power Automate cloud flows, which is completely on cloud. So anything integration with an API, which is completely triggered from petty cache, would go into that. So this is completely free. And then there is a cloud flow that we run separately. For one is for the desktop RPA processes, and then one is for our integration. So these two are different. So if you ask me, the complete bill of materials would be this would be $5 per user. This is 190 for the unattended licenses and the attended licenses, and this gets packaged with this. So in total, you'll be spending about $200 a month, but in that about sorry $195 a month. In that 190 is fixed charges, and the $5 that you pay per license would be what you license your customers with. I hope that is clear. Now, if you were to switch this out and get your own API integration with your card systems, card providers, then you don't have to pay the 190. You could just stick with the $15 license from the Power Automate Cloud Flows, use that, and then make it a much more cheaper process.
Thank you, Justin. Okay, so everyone's aware that this is obviously a community event focused on financial services. So I guess the next question would be around considerations from a compliance perspective, right? For financial services. So were there any things that you had to consider from a security perspective when you were building out your Power Apps from a data perspective and Power Automate from an integration perspective?
So one of the considerations that we did when we were storing the data was to make sure that data masking was considered. And second, data residency was very key for us as well, considering the customer that we were working with was semi-government. So they wanted their data center completely in the region. So we used UAE data centers for our Dataverse. Our power platform completely was on the UAE tenant specifically. Now, apart from that masking of data, just as you saw, we were capturing information about the card details, but when we stored it into uh, our store, we're making sure that those information was masked specifically so that none of the information, the PII information was exposed, etc. And then integration with systems, we made sure that only relevant information was flowing between, and then we had DLP policies set up to make sure that if anyone was to use any of them, that none of these flows would talk to anything external as well. And it's always integrated, and then only we talking to systems that it's supposed to talk to specifically. And then we had a level of accesses that was provided. Uh, we had data governance modules built on it from external companies, and they were doing auditing as well to make sure that they are compliant to um, the entire laws and everything with the current government that we work with specifically.
Thank you, Justin. I like when you mentioned you implemented DLP, right? So that's
Yeah.
great. You implemented DLP. There will be a whole session on DLP shortly, guys. We do have a session on DLP shortly and on securing on security for Microsoft 365. But I'm glad that Justin mentioned that here in this particular scenario. For many of so you've got these SOAP services, right? So
Right.
did you have to build or develop any custom connectors for your cloud flows?
Right, we did. So to talk to the cloud, to the external SOAP services, we had to build our own custom connectors. So we had, let's say, we had an endpoint that we wanted to build towards, and then we used the on-premises data gateway that you get from Power Platform to make sure that the SOAP services were not exposed externally. They were completely an internal SOAP service or the web service. So we used Power Automate's data gateway to make sure that we could build those custom connectors to talk to the on-premises system directly. Um, Now, I showed you a small piece of document. I think I can bring it back up. So, oops, I think it's here. So this is the document that we had. So this was being provided from us. So this is the structure or the XML document in which we wanted to send back the information back to the SOAP service. So we built this entire document on Power Automate, and we were using it to fill in those values like the account codes, accounting period, etc., from our Dataverse, and then pushing this as is to the SOAP service using REST APIs specifically. So that's the custom connector was built just for sending this information back to the SOAP services.
That's really great, and I love the fact that you've really leveraged the full capabilities of the Power Platform here, right? So that's what I
Yeah.
love to see. So from you're a solution architect, Justin. So typically, if you mentioned earlier that the requirements to deliver this type of project comparatively against, say, a typical software development project, what would be the typical scale of resources that would be required to develop it compared to this approach, in addition to the expertise level as well?
So I think if you compare Power Platform to develop this on, let's say, on premises, because I come from a background of iOS development specifically, so I knew that to develop something of this, you need to have a lot of skill sets in here. You need to have a person who understands API integration. You need to have someone who can use, let's say, Python or any other RPA tool to extract this information, scraping this from a website or any other ways to extract it. So API integration, any other integration that needs to be there. You need to have a database architect or a database expert to build you that model, the backend data model for you to work with. And then finally, you need someone to write the code. So you need a developer to build the iOS application. And then you need an UI expert to make sure that the UI is right, it's all correct, everything is good, the UI UX specifically. And then you would have a testing team to make sure that the entire product is tested end to end before it can be shipped. Now, when we look at it from Power Platform, the thing with Power Platform developers that I've worked with and the team that I have under me is that they're well versed in using Power Automate, Power Apps, Power Virtual Agents, Dataverse. Now, the only thing that I would have to step into and help them out would be to model the databases, help them with, let's say, how an API integration works. So compared to what a large team of, let's say, 6, 7 people used to work to build this app on, let's say, iOS, you could do this entire process with 3, 4 people maximum. And we did this with 3 people. So there were 2 developers, and then me as architect, and then we had a project manager who ran the program. And that's it. We took about 4 months to complete the entire thing. Compared to what you would be doing on a traditional platform, it would take on native applications, it would take you at least 6 months to complete with all the testing, etc. done.
Fantastic. Kim's asked a question there. He's
Yeah.
mentioned, so you've hard coded into Power Automate.
No, so the thing is, it's not hard coded into Power Automate. So I'll just show you. So these tags that you can see, these are the XML tags at work. Now, what happens is, what you see in the middle, these numbers, these are variables that we pick directly from the submitted approved report that gets sent across. So once the general manager approves a specific report or a claim, we pick those numbers from the Dataverse, that is the account code, the accounting period, the transaction date, the journal numbers. Some of them are pretty much static, they don't change at all. But then there are things like your description, the base amount, transaction amount, their amounts, the entry dates, etc. So whichever we wanted to uh, make it more parameterized, we had variables that replace this specifically in our Power Automate flow. So in our Power Automate flow, we would have a specific section where it converts the entire thing that you see over here. Wherever we wanted to change those values, we plug in those custom variables in there and then generate it out as a single document. That's the XML document, then push that document back as the body into the web services. So that's what we have done. Correct. Exactly. So this structure has to be followed as is because this is how the web service works. So we didn't want to change anything, but the values, we were changing it every time we were running something into it.
And there's a big thanks there from Mark and from Venkata, as well as from Kim. Thank you for your answers there, Justin. I guess we can wrap up on a final question, I guess, which is around administration. As you can imagine, you've spent all this time and effort building a solution that works. Well done, congratulations.
Thank you.
Now, when it comes to maintaining error management, would you like to share kind of any tips and tricks that you do to help administer and manage and maintain the service?
Yeah, so one of the things that we use the most, let me just get my screen back up, I think here. So one of the things that we use the most is, so every time you use your platform, let's say you build an app on Power Platform, you could monitor it. So you have a monitoring option to see information about how things run. So we have seen this with previous applications that we have built. So this is not our first application that we built. We would use this monitor specifically. So how do you get it is you click on the application, you click on monitor, and then this starts up the app for you. Now you can play the published app, you could run through it, and then you could actually see if something was breaking. So you could get every single information about your application, the time it took to load, the data sources it's hitting, the response size, etc. So this is what we used very specifically to make sure that we knew what was working, what is running perfectly fine, and where we can actually improve things. So some things like network, where we don't have any control over. As long as your network is going to be bad, then we really can't help you. But things like performance, screen loading, where we can improve those time, we have learned how to look at these documents or this thing's information and then actually do and then fix things faster as well. Now, apart from this administration, as you say, let's say you want to look at the usage of your application, is how many people are using it, or is it just being dormant? People are not using it. How frequently they're using it? What is the most used platform? So there is an analytics built into the application as well from Microsoft, which you can click on, and you can look at the analytics, the usages, etc. But right now, I believe this application was not used as much. But as you can see, the most number of devices it's been used is my Windows web player. So this gives you insights on what kind of devices that people use the most. So let's say you build an application thinking, well, this application is built for iPhone on mobile devices. Let's believe that people are going to use it on iPhones and mobile devices. Now, what happens with that is this way you build the application might not be responsive enough for them to work on the other platforms. And then your users end up just using them on Windows, as you can see. And then you have an option to look at these metrics and then think of how do you enhance this product better. So this is your platform now. This is your solution that you build. Now you can look at these metrics and say, how do you enhance it? How do you better it? And also you can look at the different countries from where people are trying to access this as well. So when they've used it, the active users, inactive users per player version, etc., number of launches, all the information that you can see in here gets you an information at least to a very high level to make sure you make decisions to either improve adoption of the platform that you've spent money on, improve the adoption, or also improve the user experience. So you know that people are using Windows, so you make the UI more responsive so that make sure that when they open up on Windows, it doesn't look very small and centered. You make it wider so there's more screen space, more elements, etc. So you can build those back into the platform as well. Now, apart from this, we had certain administration jobs that we're running in the backend as well, like data duplication, etc. jobs to make sure that for some reason, let's say I opened the application, it crashed, but then for some reason I was halfway through the process. So we want to make sure that if there's any incomplete processes, incomplete code, incomplete claims, we wanted to clean them out at the end of the day. We had flows running on top of the Dataverse, so you can use jobs, duplication jobs, deduplication jobs. You can build those on the Dataverse, and this will run in the backend for you as a cleanup activity to make sure that your Dataverse is always clean and not causing so much of junk to be flowing into it as well. So these are some of the administration tasks that we did. Apart from that, we also built a small application on the front end. I think it's part of the center of excellence that you get from Power Platform for giving users access, providing access, sharing the application, very simple UI. So if your end customers or your administrators are not very well versed with how Power Apps works and how do you share the applications, etc., we have an application which to it's called a set new app owner where you can click on app, you can share it, very simple use application. This is also part of Center of Excellence, where you can use and send this app across to your administrators for giving access to different applications. So if I click on a specific environment, I get to see the app. I can share this app with anyone I want, add new users, make owners, etc. It's very simple to use. This way, it also makes your administration tasks much easier. But if you ask me, Center of Excellence platform, the Power Platform Center of Excellence code that's available on the GitHub, you should go download it, use it if you're trying to deploy any, let's say, any Power App activity, any Power App platform that you're going to deploy. Make sure you do this as the first step. So you build that governance layer, everything in the first. So you have administration, access pod, then you have a developer center of excellence as well, which is for your developers requesting you for new environments, how that gets created and how the whole process runs. There's an app for that also within the Power Platform COE module. So you can download this, you can install it onto your environment, and it's the best thing that you can do, and it's very easy to set up. Once you set up, a lot of these confusion that you have with the platform goes away. It makes it very easy to work on the platform. You get a lot of apps that you use to make sure that all this administration task is done seamlessly and easily for you. And also Microsoft has added a lot of features to make sure that when you share an app with someone, let's say you share an app with someone, it automatically kind of adds all the list of roles for you automatically into the app. So it makes it kind of easier for you to work with the platform as well now, as it's grown leaps and bounds in what it was when I started working on it, let's say 3 years back. So I hope that answered the question, Raz.
Thank you very much, Justin. Yes, that was fantastic. So we're at the end of the hour. So I just want to thank you, Justin, once again. And congratulations on this fantastic app. Could you do us a favor and share your contact details in the chat window for the attendees to keep in contact with you. Is that okay?
Yeah, I would do that. No worries.
Thank you so much, Justin. And again, it was a pleasure to have you here today.
It was a pleasure giving the session as well. Thank you for the invite, Raz.
Thank you so much. There you go. That was Justin. So Justin sharing his details there. Okay, fantastic. So now we are on to our next session of the day.